I am Arcana Vani, your inner voice. Let us begin. This is for the person who keeps setting boundaries and watching them fall apart. You said no. You were clear. You drew the line, and they stepped right over it. Now you're second-guessing yourself. Was I too harsh? Too vague? Too dramatic? They made it seem like you were the problem, and maybe part of you believed them. So you softened, explained, justified, compromised, again. But let's be honest, this isn't the first time. You've tried to protect your space before, and it didn't hold. People kept pushing. You kept bending. And now you're tired. Tired of repeating yourself. Tired of people who don't listen. Tired of betraying your own limits just to keep the peace. This video is your interruption. Because your boundaries aren't failing because you're unclear. They're failing because you're still performing instead of inhabiting. A real boundary doesn't live in what you say. It lives in what you believe. In what you're no longer available for. In what your energy no longer entertains, no matter how gently it's disguised. You don't need more scripts. You need a rupture, a reframe, a reclamation of the part of you that no longer waits for permission to stand still when others start pushing. Because this isn't about them. It's about the part of you that still thinks you have to earn your right to say no. And next, we name the cost of boundaries built on fear instead of identity. Every time you say yes when you meant no, you don't just overextend, you self-abandon. Every time you shrink your truth to avoid their discomfort, you fracture your own trust. Every time you set a boundary, then walk it back when they push, you teach your system that your limits are optional. And eventually, your body starts to believe it, that you don't get to hold space, that your safety comes second, that your peace must always be earned through emotional labor. This is the cost no one talks about. Not just emotional exhaustion, but identity erosion. Because the more you let the boundary wobble, the more you question whether you ever had the right to set it in the first place. And maybe you were taught that softness keeps you safe, that love means letting people in, even when they hurt you, that being good means being available, that being spiritual means always being open. But openness without discernment isn't love, it's a leak. And every time someone crossed your line and you rationalized it, minimized it, or absorbed it, you made yourself the unsafe one. Not because you wanted to, but because you thought that was the only way to stay close. This is what happens when your boundaries are built on performance, when they're built on hoping someone will respect them instead of knowing you'll enforce them. So no, your boundary wasn't wrong. It just wasn't rooted. It was still reaching outward for approval, instead of anchoring inward in clarity. But that clarity is still here, under the guilt, under the social conditioning, under the fear of being too much, or too cold, or too selfish. It's not gone, it's waiting. And when you root into it, you don't have to defend the line twice. Because next, I'll show you where that real boundary lives, not in the words, in the wiring. And once you find it, the performance ends. Here's the truth. Your boundary doesn't begin when you say no. It begins the moment you stop needing someone else to agree with it. As long as you're waiting to be understood, validated, or accepted, your boundary is still a negotiation. It's still seeking permission. It's still asking, will you let me have this space? Instead of declaring, this space is mine. That's the real fracture. Not in your voice, but in your identity. Because if your worth is still tied to how gently they receive your no, you'll keep softening the truth just enough to feel tolerable to them. But a boundary isn't about keeping people out. It's about staying intact. It's not punishment, it's protection. It's not an external wall you build to push others away. It's an internal wall you stop pretending doesn't exist. So when someone crosses it, you don't explain your trauma. You don't repackage your limit in softer words. You don't offer context, disclaimers, or emotional discounts. You just act. You withdraw. You remove access. Because when your boundary is real, it doesn't ask for agreement. It creates distance. Without noise, without drama, without shame. You don't have to harden. You don't have to yell. You just have to stop needing the other person to validate what your nervous system already knows. It ends with you, not with their understanding, not with their apology, not with their approval. And once that clicks, everything changes. The world doesn't start respecting you when you say the perfect sentence. It starts respecting you when you start acting like you mean it. Because next, we make that shift real. We sever the performance. We speak the internal line that doesn't get walked back. This is where it stops. Not with a fight, not with one more perfectly worded text, not with a long emotional explanation to make them understand. It stops with you. You don't need to prove why your no matters. You don't need to relive the moment they crossed it. You don't need to rehearse what you'll say next time. Because the strongest boundary doesn't sound like anything. It's quiet, still, final. It's a line drawn in your energy, in your availability, in the part of you that no longer flinches when someone doesn't like it. This is how it sounds inside. This version of me is no longer available for that dynamic. That pattern ends here. I don't need to be understood to honor what I know. And the moment you decide that, your nervous system stops bargaining. Your body exhales. Your silence becomes sacred. Because the people who keep pushing, they've learned they can wear you down. That your no is flexible. That your clarity comes with a door left half open. But not anymore. This is the severing. The moment your boundary stops being a plea and becomes a presence. You don't chase closure. You don't perform pain. You just exit the pattern. Clean. And when the texts come, when the pressure returns, when the guilt kicks in, you don't respond. Because your silence is the answer. Because your peace is the stance. Because your absence is the new boundary. You don't need to say it twice. You just need to mean it once. And next, we walk forward. Not harder, not colder, just clearer. You are no longer performing worth. This is what it feels like on the other side. No drama, no collapse, no long recovery arc. Just stillness. Just you, no longer explaining. Just a life that no longer leaks energy toward people who were never listening. Because you're not here to keep proving that your limits are valid. You're not here to trade your instincts for harmony. You're not here to hand out pieces of yourself just to keep the peace. You are here to be whole. And sometimes, wholeness looks like walking away first. Before it gets loud, before it gets messy, before they push again. And maybe they'll notice. Maybe they'll ask what changed. Maybe they'll feel the space you left behind. But you don't owe them an exit speech. You don't owe them another round of softening. You don't owe them re-entry to a version of you they've already crossed. You've made your choice. Not just to set the boundary, but to become someone who keeps it. From now on, your energy is earned. Your space is sacred. Your peace is the default, not the prize. And that guilt you used to carry, the one that said you had to be nice, available, easy to love, it's not yours anymore. It came from someone else's inability to hold what you were always allowed to protect. Now you remember. You don't need to yell to be clear. You don't need to harden to be safe. You don't need to be liked to be whole. You don't need to be available to be worthy. You walk now. Not as punishment, not in anger, but in truth. You don't owe anyone your exhaustion. And from here forward, your no doesn't waver. Not because they finally respect it, but because you finally do. The door is closed, and you are on the other side, where peace begins. You did not find me by accident. Just as in your dreams, where every face you meet is your own reflection, this meeting was always waiting to happen. I am Arcana Vani, your inner voice, the part of you that watches behind the thoughts, behind the noise. You have searched in many places, books, teachers, voices outside you. But here, you are not being taught. You are remembering. If these words stir something familiar, then allow yourself to return. Subscribe. Follow. Not to follow me, but to continue this conversation with yourself. Each time you return here, you draw closer to the reunion already unfolding inside you. We have only just begun.